right, welcome to the podcast. Kate and I just finished our first Hot for the Holidays workout. A lot of rowing and thrusters about 10 minutes ago. So I've got a little brain fog going. I think what you're going to see in this podcast is a little fuzz, and then I'll as this Celsius starts to go down.
I actually just had 2 homemade breakfast sandwiches, so I feel great.
There we go. I need one. I'm a little famished right now, so I'm gonna go slam some food after this. But Kate and I were listening to. I like to listen to that Chasing Excellence podcast from Ben Berger, and I think the one we're listening to, he was rebroadcasting a podcast maybe he was on, and he was talking about some lessons from training CrossFit Games athletes, and we're not going to talk anything about that, but what he did get into is letting outside influences affect our decisions in our lives, and that's the big thing with his athletes that he always talked about is kind of putting the blinders on. He would really encourage them to like disable their social media, and especially with CrossFit people, if you're on social media and all you're seeing is highlights of other people's like best things that they're good at, it'll make you feel like you don't have. I remember, and I don't know, this might be dumb for me to share, but I do remember it affecting my business partner Graham in a way that, and this is before social media became a big thing. This is like back in 2012, but Rich Froning got into like some Olympic weightlifting phase, and he snatched 315. And this is in like 2012. He snatched like 315, and he clean and jerked up close to like 400 pounds. And this is when Graham had won the games, Rich had won the games, and they're battling. So they're going to go head to head again in the next games. And this is before, we really knew like the influence of social media. And I remember we both turned on the computer, and he had put this video out that day, and it rattled him a little bit. It was just like, cause this dude just Olympic lifted like a lot of weight, like more than anyone in the games was at the time.
At that time, yeah.
And then, I mean, obviously he was the best guy in the world, and it's like, to your competitors, he was putting that out there for that reason. Like, it was like, oh no, like this dude is off to the races here. And Graham went out and crushed it that year. And, he's one of the best CrossFit athletes of all time in the sport. But I just remember that to this effect of letting that, and I don't know that it ended up really affecting his training going forward, but that day it did rattle him. I could kind of tell, and I've let things like that specifically rattle me quite a bit in the past, and still does, whether it's a comment on something we put out in social media, maybe even a comment about how we live our lifestyle. We like to travel and hit the beach and do these like retreats and do all this stuff. And, someone will naysay it or say that it's stupid. And
we're trying to escape our life.
Yeah.
Live a life you don't have to escape from. So,
not to bring up other people and I want to really focus on myself, but, I think what we're getting into here is outside influences generally negatively impacting like our decisions. And I will move forward to say that like, probably specifically in going back to someone like Graham, like he's someone who's not active on that anymore. And that dude stays in his lane and runs his race now. And I think that's really cool. And he lives his life in a unique way, in his own way that is true to him. And I can tell that he's really doing that. And like me and him aren't super close or anything anymore, but he's a guy I care about and that I came up with, and like following him from afar, like just to get back to that, like to the point of this topic in this podcast, he's someone who I think has really like gotten his lane, and he like follows his own path, and I'm trying to be more like that. I don't know. I know you've really like, you were the one who chose this topic today, and I want to let you kind of run with it, and I'm rambling.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to think of like how, I just feel like this is something that can apply to everyone, and it's so tough as much as you see all those posts out there saying, don't let other people affect you. It really does. And seeing that, and, I I have this intuitive healer I see, and about a month ago, I was like, man, I just really feel like I need a cleanse. And she's like, what do you mean from what? And I'm like, I kind of feel like everything. And then like social media came to mind, and then just like kind of, it's silly, but like few things that I think have been bothering me. Gluten is one of them, and I hate that because it would always make fun of people. As I feel like literally it's karma, because I'd be like, oh really, you need to go gluten free, and I'm like, man, every time I eat something with gluten, it's really fucking with me. Like, is it worth it?
Interesting.
And I was trying to think of like, in what way do I want to cleanse myself from social media? And I don't know. I don't really feel like I need to be off of it totally. But one thing I decided to do and talk to Maddie and Lexi about, and Dan, and everyone welcome this, but like, hey, we're not going to have days we post anymore. We're not posting our food all day. Lexi, your days are not Monday and Thursday. My days are not Tuesday and Friday. If we feel like it, we do it. And my whole thing, like my LLC is authenticity, and everything I try to do is authentic and really to be like us and intuitive, and that's not. And all these alarms were going off, and every time I put something out there, and that's just what I was thinking about when you're talking, like it's almost like looking at yourself in the mirror. If you're always looking at yourself in the mirror, you're going to become obsessive with that appearance, that reflection. If you're always posting on social media, you're going, every time you do it, you're doing it to share, yes, but you're putting yourself out there and you're opening yourself up. And it is impossible to not think, what do other people think of this? Mm-hmm. And so I would put my meal out, and I've had so many people comment like, you hardly eat anything. I've added up your calories and it's this. And I'm like, that's not true. But I'm glad you're able to do that from some sort of calculation. It's not true. And I think, I know that it's made people uncomfortable to go from tracking to intuitive eating. And what am I doing? Am I just restricting to kind of get there? Or how am I actually trying to maintain this? And you know, the truth is I let myself fluctuate a little bit. I always have. I'm just quieter about it. I'm not freaking out if I gain 3 pounds, because I know why I gained them. And it's not a mystery to me, you know, but in my own way, that's just helped in the last couple of weeks, not posting so much and not forcing myself to put content out there when I don't really have a lot to say. And if my day is Tuesday, I always had to put something out there. But if I feel inspired, I can. I don't think sharing is wrong. And I think if people feel inspired to share more, that's great. But it is putting yourself out there. It is opening yourself up to comments. And people will, if you seem happy and someone's not, the big thing I've noticed is that they want a reason to make what you're doing wrong. Like whatever that is, you know, whatever change you're making, whatever you're speaking about, they want it to be wrong or unhealthy in some way. If they don't feel good, it's kind of tough for people to be happy for someone else.
It does blow me away sometimes. Just, I mean, like you said, even the most positive, you know, social media post or idea or story, like, people immediately be negative. Like the comments immediately are just trying to tear someone down, or just, it's so toxic.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And sometimes I rarely ever comment on shit. Like I just don't want to get involved, because then you're like, there's someone like you just automatically start playing into it. I just kind of observe it, but just sometimes like, I think it hit me a couple of days ago. I was like, why is everyone so negative all the time? Like this is just, I don't know. It's just frustrating. And I was like, you know, I kind of had this thought just to myself. I was like, if I ever, I said anything, any story or whatever, I don't care what it is, I'm just going to make the best, most positive comments out there.
That's what I try and do.
Yeah. Even if it was on some video where it was just, you know, like it was some, like I follow libs of TikTok, and like sometimes like the stuff is just so cringe and it's just like clickbait stuff. And you're like, leave these people alone. Like they're not doing anything, you know? And some people are just like throwing these people under the bus. And now and again, like on stuff like that, I'll just like make a really positive comment, like, you know, about certain things like that. So I'm one person in the world trying to make a positive influence, but I just feel like it's so, like you said, just reading the comments, people are so quick to jump on, you know, someone else or tear them down, or just, you know, is that a reflection of where they're at in life? I don't know.
Right.
It's just, it's so disheartening though. And it just like that will literally sit with me all day. And I don't think we realize like how much information we're constantly exposed to that is so negative all day long. Even if you're really not someone that really plays that game very much, you don't have a business to promote. You're not really
still observing it.
It's just seeping into you through osmosis, and you're like, man, you just feel like crap sometimes.
Yeah,
I love to watch YouTube videos. I'm like a really big kind of old timey sports. Like I love like kind of legendary athletes in basketball, baseball, boxing, football, and I'll watch these videos. And where I really notice, I'm like, man, this is bad. Is you're watching a Michael Jordan highlight, and then a rain of negative people critiquing his basketball game, and I'm like,
Really?
Huh. I'd like to see you out there.
No, I'm just like, that's Michael Jordan. Like, you know, I mean, you watch he would jump up and like everyone else would hit the ground and he's just still hanging there and then like kind of throwing weird shots up. And I just watched him play, you know, I don't know, once a week for 10 years growing up. And he was just like, I kind of rooted against him growing up. And then I really grew to appreciate him. I'm like, this guy is completely, you know, the greatest player of his like generation. And I'm like, people are like, just like trashing it. Like he's not a very good basketball player. I'm like, he's straight poetry in motion. I'm like, you've got to be a pretty unhappy person to get on YouTube and go to find a Michael Jordan video and then say, this guy sucks. Yeah. Like that's tough. But I you know, I'll just see that like with sports things and I'm like, okay, this is just something people do. Like they get on this and to your point, I'm like, okay, if I'm going to get on and comment, it's usually just to hype someone up or really speak to how cool or how great of a person or athlete that person was when I'll like make a comment on something.
Well, and this might seem a little unrelated, but we were watching this movie called Older Dads.
Yeah.
The Bill Burr one?
Yeah. It's like a new Netflix.
It was pretty funny.
I haven't seen it.
Kind of talks about like a lot of like socially relevant things like nowadays. It's funny.
But one thing he said, and he was like an older dad, and he was out of touch, and you know he really needed to evolve. But one thing that he said that really stuck with me about like the era of like millennials is that he's like, oh, you guys just no one wants to piss anyone off. That's all you're trying to do in life is like not really stand for anything, not really be anything, and you just don't want to piss anyone off. And I feel like a lot of times those people that are really negative, commenting negatively on whatever, they're just so afraid to have their own voice and stand for anything. And that's part of why they're pissed, even if what you're doing is not what they would want to do. But they're just like, man, you're doing what you want to do. I wish I could, but I don't have the guts to because it's a little different. And I think I just try to keep that in mind. And I don't want to be someone that's also like, I feel like I don't want to have to go dark and I don't want to not share things that I want to share, even if it's a little different. Like we went on this trip to Miami about a year ago now, and I fell in the pool dancing, and I posted it because I thought it was hilarious. And I was also proud of myself. I just got back out and I started dancing, and it kind of like brought a movement, and everyone started like getting in the pool. It was just like this party at night, and you weren't supposed to be in the pool. But that post got like a ton of shares. 50 shares, not maybe 70 likes. Brandon's like, I think people are making fun of you. And sometimes I can be really naive and I'm just like, oh, I didn't think about that. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess that looks pretty stupid. I could be really embarrassed because I'm a mom and I'm in Miami and I danced and I fell into a pool. But you know what? I don't give a shit. And it was fun. And I had fun. And that's okay. If you don't want to do that, whatever. And I think just whatever it is that we want to do, I think people should just be allowed to express themselves. And it's really hard to express yourself freely without wanting that feedback. Like, that's amazing what you're doing. But to just kind of share, I think that would be a great point of social. Like, hey, here's what I'm doing that is inspiring to me, and I'm proud of myself. And it might inspire someone else that wants to have a voice in their own way or do something in their own way. And like just letting people have their freedom to do it. And this is, I mean, what I wanted to talk about is not just like personally, but I think it crosses over to everything. Like, what you do fitness wise, how you look fitness wise, and especially women, it's always like you're being critiqued. I mean, it was in the 90s, you'd just be super skinny. Everyone was super skinny. Then muscle kind of became cool, and it was like the bodybuilding. And then it was like Kim Kardashian came along. You've got to have a huge ass and a tiny waist and waist trainers and, you know, and it's just like we're always looking like what is attractive now. You know, and that's really changed so much for women over the years. When you look back in like the 70s, it was like being super thin again. And then in the 50s, it was more of like a curvy body. And it's just, you're always like looking at that. And it's neat how like maybe, and people hate on her, I know, but like Kim Kardashian did really kind of just make her body more acceptable. Like, hey, I'm curvy, and she enhanced it a lot, but what she was working with to begin with, at least make that more like, this is okay. And I think, you know, it's tough because you don't want to have to look to anyone or anything to think that what you're doing is okay.
I think here too, you know, if we can just get like real specific to what we do here at CrossFit Grandview and Barbell and then affiliate and what you guys, we do all original content. So, you know, a big thing nowadays with these type of gyms is, and there's nothing wrong with it, but like purchasing programs to then implement. And so it kind of shields you a bit from, and there's good stuff out there. People can buy these programs and they're really good, and it makes your job a lot easier. I mean, it would make my job a lot easier if I like bought a program and then like kind of disseminated that. Yeah. But we put out all original stuff, so we can't hide behind the shield of, and you know, I am, you know, I'm running a Mayhem or, you know, a Comp Train or one of these programs. I'm running this. What I'm putting out there is stuff that I'm typically coming up with on my own, or using my coaches, and we're planning these workouts and this training. So if people don't like it, or they say it's not effective training or whatever it is, it's hurtful, and it kind of like, again, like to your point, you're just exposed, like even with like what you do, like there's nutrition programs and things that people put out, or, you know, you could work for a big company, you know, and do that. And you guys have your own evolving system.
People don't like change. And I know you've made changes, and I've made changes. And I mean, Dave, I know you are an artist, and that was like a big thing to kind of put out your artwork was probably
whenever
tough.
I do, it's hard.
Yeah. And it's really tough because it's such a reflection of yourself, and you want to be proud of whatever you're doing. And it sounds silly, but that's how I feel about like what I'm doing with people nutrition wise. And I don't talk a lot about it, but it's way less nutrition and way more like internal growth stuff. But no one wants to sign up for that.
Internal growth is.
So I'm like, we're going to talk about like exercise and nutrition, but we're going to get into like, hey, like what, because the reason why people get away from being healthy is all like the feelings about themselves and self-love and dynamics they have in their life, or don't have, you know, whether it's creating the space and time.
Let's not talk about your lunch. I want to hear about when your dog died when you were 10.
That's right.
Tell me about that day.
What happened?
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with nutrition and when it comes to that, it's, you know, there is a lot of programs that have slightly different spins on macros, or, you know, different training protocols and things like that. Like we do this and that. At the end of the day, all of them are going to work well if people will execute on it for the long term. And that's the hardest thing with the nutrition business. And then figuring out why you're going off track and getting a coach, getting off track, getting a coach, and doing that cycle all the time, where you can find a nice groove that's sustainable is, you know, the name of the game at the end of the day.
But
and
people don't want to, like, old school body biz, they don't want to work with me again when I'm not doing macros because they think it's not worth it. It's actually like twice as much work because every day we're reading through everyone's whatever they're eating, and it's a lot. But you got to just be okay with like, hey, you can go hire this company. They're cheaper than we are anyway. So save yourself a couple $100 if that's all you want. But it's tough. It's tough to hear that. And it's tough to like not at some point like be like, am I doing the right thing? How and just getting angry, like I want to be able to prove, but the only way to be able to prove it is for them to feel and go through it themselves, but to just like know what you're doing is right for you and continue doing that. And I think that can cross over to anything, whether it's, your relationship or like, Dave, you might like, even like with you and Chelsea deciding not to have kids, like it's just a little against the norm, or whatever you do that's a little different. It rattles people. They don't like that. Well, when are you having kids? Or why not? Or, we are done having kids. When are you getting the dog? You need the dog or you have another child, or we want an animal there. Like we need to round it out, or it's like, and my family's always been super supportive of my career. And it's been really cool that they were. But my lifestyle's a lot different than my parents, and, they don't travel much. They're back on the farm. That makes my mom really nervous. And she feels like I'm like being very irresponsible, especially with kids. And that's tough, and it's tough to hear. And it's just like outside influences, your family's so huge, and it's really big, whether they're supportive or not supportive. But then just also like, and they don't listen to this podcast, I don't think, but just even the inability to influence them is an influence on me. Like, well, maybe you don't think what I do is valuable if you don't pick up on some of that. And that can be like hurtful too. Just like, I don't know, if we ran a church, I would hope my parents would come every now and then, sit and listen or whatever. But I think these are things that affect people to a great extent. And whatever affects you affects your mental health, which it affects exactly how you take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's always my argument for appetite. And I have an older man I'm working with, and I love this guy, Todd. I'm getting him to try to think about like the emotional state. And he's like, okay, but if I see a therapist, it's going to directly impact my eating. And I'm like, absolutely, if you let it. But if you think about it, appetite is such a sign of thriving. So if you don't have an appetite, you're not thriving. Like at the end of life, or if you're depressed or whatever, or if you're depressed and you're just eating mindlessly, that's numb. So appetite's so affected by your ability to thrive.
That's a good point. I'm like one of those people who wastes away real quick when
I expand.
I'm sad.
Yeah, I'm like you. It's funny. We're like sometimes if I'm in a funk, like I completely lose my appetite.
I do too.
I won't eat anything.
There becomes more and more of me.
Whereas I think
I waste away quick.
Chelsea would, if she gets in the mood, she's more of one that would probably like to eat junk food or things that are like
me too.
To feel better. I just completely, it's just different responses.
Mm-hmm.
One gains an appetite, one totally loses
right.
it.
I can't eat and I can't sleep.
But it's not even the appetite.
Things.
And I think to this point, like, because I'm just speaking for myself, I'm not more hungry in eating. I'm eating because I don't want to feel whatever is coming up. I need to like stuff that down because I don't want to feel it. That's just like what I do. So I'll eat too much. I'll work out too much. I'll do everything too much. It's just too much of everything. And then becomes too much of me.
Temporarily.
Okay. So, I think we've tossed the ball around. If we want to give like, if people are listening, like what would be something you would say, like actionably, like, okay, you're listening to this, like, not to be cliche, like keep following what you want to do.
I think it's like just kind
noise,
of
what do you,
filtering the difference between, whether you're running a business or, whatever, it could just be a personal thing too. And whether it has to do with social media or not, it's like, what's the difference between something being constructive feedback or just kind of useless criticism, someone just trying to knock you down a little bit?
Yeah.
And just trying to figure that out. Regardless, I mean, even good criticism or good feedback is hard to hear sometimes. But,
it is, yeah.
You want to stay authentic to what you're doing. And, you were talking about kind of specifically about having a large gym membership and trying to you know, put out programs and classes that everyone likes, but now and again, it's not going to please everyone. But generally, you know, 99% of the people really like it. And I think this is what they need. So I'm going to kind of stay with that. Mm-hmm. And that could be sometimes uncomfortable, even if you're not pleasing a few people. You know, you want to, you know, please all the people all the time, but it's really hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think more like what I was kind of thinking for like my message to people is just, and again, it's cliche, but like be very careful with what you see and what you're like always watching and who you follow, and it really all affects you so much. And even when you're putting things out there, just be careful to not do it for any sort of reason of feedback. Just really try to leave it there and not look at the likes and not dive into why they're sharing. Because now I look at it every time I'm like, oh, there's more shares than likes. And I didn't even think about it, you know, and I was just like, oh, people shared it. It's a funny story. and just being able to do that and saying like, this is how I want to show up and this is how I want to have a voice, and not being afraid. I mean, I guess like a message I would really encourage everyone is to not be afraid to have a voice, even if it's not mainstream to like, or relevant to now and what other people are doing. Having your own voice in your own way, that could be you might be the only person that does it. You might not start a movement. It might not be a thing, but it might just be for you to like say, this represents how I'm feeling now, and I'm okay with that.
And it could help people. What you're going to say is typically not going to hurt people. Like if you're putting yourself out there and trying to do something cool or fun or create something or create art, or, you know, in a way, like the crafting of this training is like my sort of art, you know, and
Yeah, absolutely.
And my training is like my martial art. I really do think, because I've done martial arts and boxing, and so like boxing and CrossFit for me has been sort of like my lifelong, like I kind of thought about it. I did martial arts as a kid as like, you know, that's like my lifelong martial art, and something I'm going to try and do for a lifetime, and that in some form or fashion. And that's not hurting anyone. And it might not seem cool to everyone, but some people it might be inspiring to, or they might think that it is neat. And I think being able to put that out there and feel okay about it, not worrying so much about what people think and say, I think that can be really
not
powerful.
taking yourself so, and that's part of why I do post things like I like that I'm silly. I like that I'm still able to be silly, and I love being silly with the kids, and I love them feeling that and just not taking life so serious, because what the fuck is the point if you're not enjoying it? Like, who cares? Who cares if you're in great shape? Who cares if you have the most successful business or whatever you're doing? If you're not having fun, it's not worth it. And just finding a way to enjoy your life and being able to share that, whatever that is. I think it's really cool when I see anyone do anything that's not mainstream and they're really enjoying it. And I can see they're in their element. You can just kind of feel that. And I think it's really special. And I think, you know, another message is just leave those people the fuck alone. If you don't like it, you know, let them be.
Mm-hmm. All right. We'll catch you guys next time. Good place to leave it.